100 U.S. troops officially left Iraq. Chaos has overtaken that country. There's an Al-Qaeda-led insurgency happening in Iraq, and the situation has recently gone from bad to worse, with militant groups taking charge of major cities, including Fallujah and Ramadi. The death toll has climbed to its highest level since 2006-2007, when fighting between Sunnis and Shiites left tens of thousands dead. Earlier today, lawmakers on the House Foreign Affairs Committee held a hearing focused on both Al-Qaeda's resurgence in Iraq and the threat to the entire region. Congressman Adam Smith from Washington State is the ranking Democrat on that committee. Joins me live now. Congressman, in simple terms here, is the war in Iraq, is it as far from over as it was a decade ago?
Well, it's a different struggle. The war a decade ago was about Saddam Hussein and our conflict with him. Now you have an Al-Qaeda presence there, and it's not just Iraq. We're seeing the same thing in Syria, in Libya, in Egypt. You know, radical extremist groups, violent extremist groups, affiliating themselves with Al-Qaeda are spreading. And a lot of times they have local agendas primarily, but a lot of them also have the transnational terrorist goals that the groups in Iraq and Syria have aspired to. So that fight continues.
Congressman, moving forward, how do we decide which of these groups to go after?
Well, I think there's two critical factors. Number one, the most important thing is if you have a group that we can establish is planning attacks against specifically Western targets. Like I said, in Syria, in Iraq, a lot of places, they're fighting a local revolution. The biggest threat to us is the ones that glom on to the transnational terrorist agenda, because that's what we're trying to protect the homeland from. And I think the second thing we need to be aware of is the limited ability that we have on our own to control this. We need local partners. We need people in these nations who are willing to stand up and fight against Al-Qaeda. And when those people emerge, we have to help them. That's why for some time I thought we should have done more in Syria in terms of at least supporting the moderate groups who are opposing the violent extremists in that region. But this is not a fight where the U.S. can show up with boots on the ground and make a difference. Because look, Al-Qaeda's message is that they are defending the Muslim world against Western aggression. Now that message is garbage, frankly. They're trying to oppress people, and nobody has killed more Muslims than Al-Qaeda, but every time we strike, it reinforces that message. We need local partners to lead this fight.
You've mentioned several times the connection between what's happening in Iraq and what's happening in Syria, where, of course, Al-Qaeda still has an affiliate. This is the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee this morning, talking about the violence in Iraq as it connects to Syria. Take a listen.
Multiple car bombings struck the capital this morning. The nearly 9,000 deaths in Iraq last year made it the bloodiest since U.S. forces departed in 2011. The civil war in neighboring Syria only further strengthens this group.
With so many dangerous extremists making up part of the rebel fighters there in Syria, how should we change our plans with regards to that country? What should we be doing differently there?
Well, I think we need to continue to look for moderate groups and be more aggressive in supporting them. I mean, we have been concerned about, making sure we pick the right ones, but we have clearly identified some number of folks who are actively fighting against al-Musri and ISIS, the two extremist-affiliated groups in the region, or the two main extremist-affiliated groups. We should support them in that fight. Now, that's not boots on the ground, but it's getting them equipment, it's getting them humanitarian support, where appropriate, it's training them. And I want to say one note of positive here.
Yeah.
These extremist groups are spreading, but they also very quickly become unpopular, just like we saw in Iraq, because they have nothing to offer except killing. They are violent in the extreme. They kill the local population indiscriminately, and they can't govern or produce any kind of decent way of life for people. And people learn that, and they want an alternative to it. We saw it happen in Iraq, even in Syria in recent weeks. There have been some setbacks for the violent extremist groups as the local population has rejected their ideology and their approach. We need to partner together, like I said, first of all with locals, and second of all with our international friends to give support to those groups who want to oppose these violent extremist groups.
Congressman, as we gear up to withdraw most or all of our troops from Afghanistan later this year, how worried should we be that the same sort of deadly chaos unfolds there as a power vacuum is filled with terrorist groups?
Yeah, I think that's a concern in any of these countries. But look, it's not just in the countries that we've been in and then come out of. We've seen it in Egypt. We saw it in Libya before we even got there. And we didn't really get there. We just helped remove Gaddafi. So this is a problem that goes beyond where the U.S. presence is. And in Afghanistan, I think it's a real threat. Between Afghanistan and Pakistan, along that border that, frankly, the locals there don't even really recognize, you have a lot of Al-Qaeda-affiliated violent extremist groups. Now, they're not all the same. Like I said, they have different agendas, different takes on the ideology. But to one degree or another, we need to be concerned about all of them. And having a stable Afghan government with a decent security force is clearly in our best interests. But the problem is we can't just wave a magic wand and make that happen. We could stay there for another decade or two, and at the time we left, we'd be in the same situation. It's got to be the locals who take over responsibility for security.
Let's shift gears entirely here and talk about something a lot happier. Your Seahawks, your Seattle Seahawks, arriving back in Seattle today. You, of course, will not be there for the parade this afternoon. How excited, how stoked are folks in Seattle to have this first ever football championship?
I have never seen the city this excited. In fact, my wife has told me from back home that I-90 is basically a parking lot right now leading into the parade. So the entire region is unbelievable. In Seattle, we're not used to this. I think it's like our second championship in forever. So we couldn't quite believe it was going to happen. So when it did, everyone was just relieved and euphoric. It's really put everybody in a better mood throughout the region. It's very exciting. And they're a great team.
Congratulations to you. We certainly hope that they can find some money out there to try to keep that squad intact.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, they're young, so free agency doesn't really start hammering us until after next year. But yeah, that will be a challenge.
All right, Congressman Adam Smith, good to talk to you, sir. Thank you. Coming up, are Republicans swearing off